Well, let's look ahead to the World Cup. Lots of speculation that will be there or thereabouts, but it's really a tough one to pick, isn't it? Because we saw the other day in that second game against Sri Lanka, you only have to be slightly off in the quarter or the semi and you're out.
You'd have to say there's 5 or 6 teams that could win the World Cup, genuinely could win it. I personally think South Africa are the strongest overall combination because they've got a good bowling attack and exceptionally good batsmen. But South Africa haven't won it and find a way to lose when you wouldn't think they can. New Zealand's playing at home. There's several teams that could win, but New Zealand's certainly in that mix.
I don't see a team from Asia going all the way. They'll have some wins, but I still think they're going to struggle with the conditions and adapting.
Well, I think Sri Lanka and India don't have good enough bowlers. I wouldn't bet against Pakistan, though. They're a bit unpredictable. They could play poorly, but they could also beat any team. They're a very good team.
Yeah, I think it's got an exciting competition because we've got the star players who attract the crowds actually performing now in the lead-up, whether they be Australian or New Zealand or South African.
Yes, Gale made a brilliant century a few days ago, an absolutely whirlwind century. So you're right, all around the world, the star players are playing great. Incidentally, I noticed Kevin Peterson batting very well in that big bash in Australia and can't get in the England team.
It's quite infectious, that, isn't it, that competition? Every night you said you're not going to watch it, but midnight you're still in front of the TV, and they're getting 20, 30,000 every night to that competition. Something's working.
Yeah, the Aussies, the bubble will burst in the end because it'll be like that Tri-Series, which there was too much sameness in the end, and so they had to stop it for a few years. I see it's back this year. And I feel like that about the Big Bash. But at the moment, yeah, it's an attraction for the crowds. I only watch the highlights myself, Tom. I don't rush through my dinner to make sure I'm ready for the start of the Big Bash match.
It's one thing they've got right. It's a timing thing, I think, because the New Zealand one was done in November and it was done on a tournament basis and there was no crowd. And it makes a huge difference to that game because it's there for the public.
Yeah, God, there are no crowds in New Zealand at all for that. There was no appetite for that whatsoever. I think it was poorly promoted as well, and as you say, it was early in the season, not on good batting wickets, and so lots of things against it. But certainly it made no impression on the cricket public at all.
Let's just look at the makeup of our team. The big talking point was Neesham missing out for Elliott. What was your impression of that? Now, I know that there's only been one game to judge Elliott on since then, but I thought unlucky for Neesham.
I thought it was. I thought the selectors actually, and they've been good selectors for the last couple of years. You really feel happy that Bruce Edgar's in that mix selecting teams. I thought they were pretty conservative with their selection for the World Cup, and certainly Neesham had a strong case to get in that team. I was surprised he didn't. And on those conservative lines as well, they went for Kyle Mills. I wouldn't have done that either. He's been injured. He's past his best. I would have gone with Henry myself.
Yeah, with Elliott, the other thing against him, and I know he did his perform as well as he could, he was playing in a domestic competition without the New Zealand players playing in that domestic competition, so it possibly may have inflated the value of his ability at the moment.
Oh, I'm sure that's right. There's a lot of players that have had great domestic competitions, and they're only fringe international standard at best. I'm just wondering what Elliott does better than Neesham. That was my concern. I don't think Neesham's the best bowler in the world, but he's certainly as good as Elliott, and to my mind, he's a better batsman and he's left-handed.
And he came off runs in the Test match, quickish runs too.
Yeah, he hits the ball hard. I mean, Elliott, as you say, he looked good in domestic cricket, but who was he playing against? He wasn't playing against real quality opposition.
As we speak, they've played a couple and had a washout. In that washout, Guptill got some runs. It was scratchy. Signs for you that there's a recovery, or is he still short of the mark?
No, I think he's made quite a few runs now. He's had a century or two even in domestic cricket and the 60-odd not out the other day in the washed-out match. So if you were graphing it, the graph's going the right way.
Any weaknesses in the team? Do you think that Vittori batting at 5, that experiment was just to cover a hole?
I don't know why they're doing that. Obviously, Ronchi's a better one-day batsman than Vittori. I don't know why you would put Vittori up the order. I couldn't understand that unless they were just trying to get him back into the field of international cricket or something. I think they're underusing Ronchi. He is such a destructive batsman. If he stays in 12 or 14 overs, destroy a team. So he would be, if I was promoting anyone, he's the one I'd be promoting.
And I thought, for that reason, it was a little bit unlucky that Watling couldn't make it as a keeper batsman with Ronchi playing as a batsman, because the way that Watling's played, he's probably the best regular keeper batsman around in the world at the moment.
Yeah, he's a good keeper. I don't know that he bats quite how they want someone to bat in this form of the game, if they're going to put Latham in the team as well. You possibly could have dropped Latham and put Watling in, but I wouldn't have put both of those in the team.
So we are excited about the World Cup, I think it's fair to say, for listening to cricket fans, because the weather forecast is good and there's some interesting matchups, and this fact that there's no absolute hot favourite like there has been in Australia Fats in the past.
Well, the interesting thing, Martin Crowe was saying it the other day, if you compare the first Rugby World Cup with the first was sort of quaint and cute, and the second was huge, a world tournament, very different to the first. And if you think of the first Cricket World Cup that we hosted, or we co-hosted, it was exciting because New Zealand did well, but it wasn't the world event that this one obviously will be. I think it'll be 50 times bigger than the first one. So it's a really big thing coming here. Huge television audiences, much bigger than the rugby audiences, but people haven't quite grasped how big it is on the world stage.
What set that tournament up, though, wasn't it? We played Australia in the first game and beat them, and then, of course, everyone was... And then the form continued, and it was New Zealand's form that turned that World Cup into a success, even though it ended up sadly.
Well, we thought it was a success. I'm not sure the Aussies remember it very fondly. I watched that World Cup game the other day, that opener. Yeah, Dean Jones was given run out when he was not out. He may well have won the game for them. Martin Crowe was given not out when he was caught behind, and he made a century. And Boone was run out when Chris Harris hit one stump from out at mid-wicket. It was the gods were in New Zealand's favour that day. They played well, but the gods were in New Zealand's favour that day.
Yes, you mentioned some of those dismissals that today would be fixed because we've got review systems, and I'm a huge fan of that review system. I don't care how fine and lick it is. The Sangakkara one, in that crucial moment, that's out.
Yeah, he was cursing and shaking his head. I think he was cursing and shaking his head because he'd been found out. I mean, you just don't get away with it anymore. It's brilliant. You know the right decision's been made.
Now, we've often debated who the next best batsman of all time is. We just put Bradman on a pedestal on its own, and we talk about Lara, we talk about Tendulkar. We don't often talk about Sangakkara, but the record says we should. This is an impressive performance over a long period of time.
Yeah, not to be underrated, Sangakkara. Also, if you think that for the first half of his career in Test cricket, he was keeping wickets as well, which kept his average down by about 10. An average of 10 for that time compared to what he's done since. I mean, since he stopped keeping, he's averaging 70 with the bat, and that's over about 8 or 9 years since he stopped keeping in tests. So if you think of it that way, he may well be the next best bat of all time.
And it is difficult to do it, I believe, in a team where you carry so much responsibility. I'm in an Australian team or a South African team where you've got a lot of other good bats around you. I don't think it's quite the pressure as if you're the star turn every time you go out to bat.
Yeah, he's had some good players around him though, Tom. I mean, he's good mate Jay Warden. He's batted for years, but he's had good openers and so on as well. The other thing about the things to mention though about Sangakkara is he's played a lot in Asia, which I think helps your batting average as opposed to playing in England or New Zealand. And they've played a lot against Bangladesh, and he has really made a lot of runs against Bangladesh. Huge scores. So I think that all that may have added 4 or 5 to his average. I don't know. He's still up in the 55 plus really, but that has helped as opposed to the case of someone like, I don't know, a Crowe back here or a Williamson in the future. You're playing a lot of cricket in New Zealand.
We look at the young people have mentioned to me who've never heard of Don Bradman, but just said, who's this guy? Because you look at Sangakkara's got 12 double centuries and I don't know, Bradman's got 13 or something like that, but he's did him in about a third of the test matches. He's just such a standout. Is there anyone in any other sport that's dominated their trade?
You got to go to real minor sports like squash with a Heather Mackay or something, but in a major sport like cricket, to have someone who basically is worth 2 of anyone else, that's phenomenal. Really, it's laughable. I mean, Bradman played 52 tests. These guys are playing 150 to get the same sort of statistics.